And breaking news from Washington, D.C. We could see a vote as soon as tonight on the future of TikTok, as well as billions of dollars of aid to Ukraine and Israel. It is part of this legislative package that has bundled up some of the most pressing issues of our time, all in this very big and complicated bundle. But senators are moving quickly along. They've already overwhelmingly passed the first procedural hurdle this afternoon, setting up a full chamber vote potentially tonight. You're looking at hour number 6 of up to 30 hours of possible debate on the package, which again includes funding for Ukraine, Israel, and the Indo-Pacific, in addition to a requirement that would force TikTok's parent company to sell or divest its ownership stake.
The federal government's job is to protect Americans against foreign and domestic threats. TikTok is a major foreign threat. The bill we are passing today puts an end to that.
A TikTok sale would be one of the most complicated and expensive transactions in history. We should be very clear about the likely outcome of this law. It's really just a TikTok ban.
And NBC's Savannah Sellers is on Capitol Hill right now. Savannah, do we have any clue on how this vote's going to go or when it's going to happen?
Yes, absolutely, Gadi, we do. In short, we do think that this will pass, and pretty quickly. But to give you a little bit more detail on that, I mean, we knew going into this that the foreign aid piece, as well as, of course, this TikTok piece did have bipartisan support. And just the TikTok piece, of course, if you remember, about a month or so ago, this passed out of committee on the House side with a unanimous vote. So we are expecting that this will pass. And our latest intel from inside where that vote is going on, as you just smartly played some of that sound, is that this debate should wrap up probably in the next couple of hours, then we actually get that vote, if not even sooner than that, Gadi.
And Savannah, I saw a clip of you on the steps of Capitol Hill a little earlier, and I think you asked a congressman something along the lines of, is there any evidence that TikTok is sending back information to China or something along those lines? How did that go?
Yeah, Gadi, that's right, because that's what this whole conversation is about, right? Is TikTok a national security risk? Is the fact that their parent company, ByteDance, is partly owned with Chinese interests a concern? Could they be sending data back to China? And we are not really getting a lot of concrete answers on that, because what's happening is these lawmakers are getting closed-door briefings. We are not privy to them. Press is not. American public is not. From national security officials. And what they're hearing, though, is obviously garnering this bipartisan support, Gadi. And so that was true. That's exactly right. I asked Senator Coons, are you hearing anything concrete that is making you concerned? And first he just said, yes, full stop. And it took some prodding for him to essentially say, yes, we think that there is this sort of data pipeline that is possible. Now, TikTok, for its part, denies that. They say they do not share American data with the Chinese government. They've even made it this point that American data is stored on American soil. It's called Project Texas. Physically, that data, they say, is here in the United States. They use Oracle, this American company, to be storing that data, Gadi. So a lot of back and forth there, but it's something that we really are dying to know, quite frankly, is what are these lawmakers hearing?
Yeah, I mean, your question just hit straight at the root of all of this, and to hear him say yes just very, very bluntly, I mean, it has massive ramifications, but we don't know any of the specifics, so very frustrating there. Is TikTok, if this passes, going away anytime soon for Americans?
It's a great question, Gadi, and let's just cut to the chase. The answer is no, definitely not anytime soon, really, if at all. So what happens from here is we do expect that this passes within the next couple of hours here on the Senate. Then it goes to President Biden for his signature. He has said, we've all probably heard that soundbite quite a few times now, yes, if it passes, if it makes it to my desk, I will in fact sign it. So then what happens is a countdown clock starts. As it's written, the bill says 9 months for ByteDance, again, that parent company, to divest TikTok, to sell it off. The President Biden, could extend that up to a year. So let's say we've got that year countdown clock, fine. Here's, though, the big thing. TikTok has vowed, we obtained this internal memo where they sent out to their employees and they said, we will move to the courts. They have vowed a legal challenge. Our understanding is that that would go to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Then whoever were to lose that most likely appeals that ruling, which then would kick it over to the Supreme Court, Gadi. So this is, I mean, seriously, years could go by. And then what would happen is that you could no longer get it in the App Store. You can't, it's not like going to disappear off your phone. You just wouldn't be able to update it anymore or download it newly. But this is something that is really upsetting, of course, many people, creators who make their livelihood, not to mention just the 170 million Americans who use this app. But I talked to some of those people who make their money on TikTok here on the Hill today. Here's what they said.
Every bit of my livelihood is tethered to TikTok.
Our elected officials are on TikTok.
We believe if it were dangerous, they shouldn't be there, but they keep trying to reach us there when it's convenient.
That was a point I heard, Gadi, over and over again, including the fact, of course, that President Biden is currently using TikTok to try to court those young voters. Of course, the same app that right now we're talking about potentially banning, Gadi.
Savannah Sellers, thank you so very much.
So fun to be up late and on my best friend's show. Thanks, Gadi.
Thanks. And joining us now is Taylor Lorenz, tech columnist for the Washington Post and author of Extremely Online. Hey there, Taylor. I mean, it's funny because you, Savannah, and I were basically on a group chat. I imagine you've seen a fair share of some of these hot takes on your For You page circulating right now. Here's some of the ones that we've been seeing just to set the scene here. Take a look.
Banning TikTok is not only a last resort, but a slippery slope in government overreach.
This app means so much to me and my business that I've decided that I can't just sit here in South Carolina and not do anything.
Just keep creating, stay positive, keep reaching out to your representatives and letting them know how much TikTok actually means to you.
Okay, so if this passes tonight, Taylor, what kind of reaction do you think we'll see from TikTokers on and off the app?
I think people are, exhausted, but also outraged. I mean, I think a lot of people recognize at this point, it's been a little bit of a boy who cried wolf situation with the company, where, they famously rallied creators really hard in 2020 and more recently around the House ban and some of these state bans. And so I think a lot of creators, look, they're upset, they're going to be outraged, but they're also kind of not immediately nervous that it's going to, be taken from them tomorrow.
And we're watching some live pictures here. It looks like Bernie Sanders is on the floor as part of this debate. But, Taylor, I want to ask, a big part of the history of a lot of these social media apps is their ability to mobilize a lot of people with a common cause. Facebook, Twitter, the Arab Spring, for example. Do you think that ByteDance and TikTok might use the app to mobilize more opposition to this ban?
Well, I mean, ByteDance or TikTok rather did what, Uber, Instacart, and tons of other tech companies have done, which is send an in-app alert, sort of pushing specific things, saying call your, congressperson back when the House bill was being passed and tell them not to pass it.
And then sixth graders flooded those. Yeah, then we saw like sixth graders, eighth graders flooding the phone banks over in Capitol Hill. Didn't go well for them, right?
Well, it didn't, I guess it didn't go well if Congress people who don't like hearing from their constituents. I mean, I think a lot of Congress people were welcoming feedback. I think the feedback was a little misdirected because not a lot of young people have an idea of exactly who to reach out to, right? They're just going to kind of go down the line. But I will say that, I do think that TikTok is trying to combat misinformation about the bill. They have their corporate comms people out. They have those creators that they're bringing to the Hill to speak on this issue. And, there's a lot of political campaigning going on. I think also it's interesting, when you're talking about the motivations of the bill and, Bernie's up there talking about stuff right now. It's so up in the air. I mean, I know what that congressperson told Savannah. Jim Himes is a representative who's been in these security meetings. Other Congress members who have been in the security meetings about national security have issued statements saying we are in the same meetings as all these other guys, and we're not hearing a single thing to worry about. So the public still doesn't have evidence of, all of these threats that they want to ban the app over. And even the Congress people in those national security meetings don't agree that they've heard anything, threatening.
Interesting. Oh, now, let me just ask you this hypothetical. What do you think a world without TikTok, or at least a Chinese-controlled TikTok, looks like? Is it dramatically different or kind of the same?
Pretty dramatically different. I mean, it's hard to remember, but Musical.ly, which is what TikTok was called before TikTok, was actually based here. It was sold to ByteDance partially because Meta and Facebook was driving it out of business. They really couldn't compete against these tech behemoths. So, now we're going to eliminate Meta and Google's biggest competitor yet again. I think we're going to be stuck with a much, less innovative social media ecosystem. TikTok has also broken the model of what social media meant. It used to be this thing about friends and connections and following someone. You don't have to follow a single person on TikTok. You can just open up. It's all algorithmically driven. And so you've seen these other tech platforms sort of copy that, but they're always 2 steps behind. So I think ultimately it's a huge loss for people that want to express themselves and communicate with the masses and reach people.
The days of Musical.ly, simpler times indeed. Thanks so much for joining us, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
And it has been 200 days since the war in Gaza began. NBC's Raf Sanchez is going to have more on the Middle East later this hour. But right now, we are looking at some mass pro-Palestinian demonstrations happening at college campuses across the country. Protesters at NYU marching to NYPD headquarters last night after 120 people, including some faculty, were arrested during protests. Columbia, Cal Poly, MIT, Michigan, UC Berkeley, the University of Minnesota, all holding demonstrations outside or sometimes even barricading or occupying buildings in protest. But it's even happening all the way across the world in Sydney University in Australia. Signs saying Columbia first, U.S. Sydney next. All universities must divest. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has more.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
Clashes and arrests from the streets of New York to the University of Minnesota to Cal Poly Humboldt. As more universities crack down on pro-Palestinian protests, citing safety concerns and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Pro-Palestinian encampments now across more than a dozen campuses as students call for universities to divest from companies connected to Israel.
We're paying a lot of tuition to be here. We want to know where our money is going. We want to know where the investments are going as students.
Overnight at New York University, police say 120 protesters were taken away in zip ties. 116 were released with summons for trespass, including assistant professor Zach Samelin.
Did you have the opportunity to leave?
I did have the opportunity to leave, yes, but what I did instead was I linked arms with my colleagues on the faculty of New York University in order to protect our students from the police.
The university said many of the protesters were not affiliated with the school and that they'd witnessed disorderly, disruptive, and antagonizing behavior, pointing to intimidating chants and several anti-Semitic incidents reported. The days of protests following congressional testimony from Columbia's president, creating a new flashpoint between free speech and hate speech.
Why do you believe they stopped this protest?
NYU has been engaged in a campaign of repressing pro-Palestinian speech for 7 months. That is, I'm unequivocal about that.
Students insisting the protest was peaceful. Today, with the NYU Business School barricaded,
People united will never be defeated.
Students gathered in nearby Washington Square Park.
It's really frustrating because they say they're for free speech and they say they're for academic freedom.
At nearby Columbia University, classes are being offered online the rest of the year. The pro-Palestinian encampment still standing following last week's mass arrests.
It's not safe.
Associate Professor Hagar Shamali says the university needs to do more for Jewish students to feel safe.
It shouldn't be that we have to shut down classes and go virtual and force us to stay home and encourage Jewish students to stay home because the protesters have created an unsafe environment. It should be the other way around.
Meanwhile, U.S. House Republicans demanding Columbia's president resign immediately for failing to crack down.
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you. And we are following breaking news. Police in Oregon confirming just hours ago that a former cop and accused child rapist at the center of a massive manhunt shot himself earlier today. And the 1-year-old boy he kidnapped is safe. Now, police say it happened as they were chasing Elias Huizar in a car near Eugene, Oregon. They say he shot himself in the head, but it's unclear what his condition is right now. Now, this is a look at a very active scene where that manhunt ended not too long ago, and it's all going down on Interstate 5 in Oregon. You see a bunch of police cars and officers surrounding that scene. Now, this all started yesterday after investigators say Huizar shot and killed his ex-wife outside of an elementary school in West Richland, Washington. They later found the body of his girlfriend at his house during a search, and then they realized a 1-year-old named Roman Huizar was missing, leading to an Amber Alert. Now, it happened as Huizar was supposed to be in court yesterday on charges of child rape from an incident in February where he allegedly sexually assaulted a teenage girl. It is a lot to break down. So NBC News correspondent Elwin Lopez joins us now. First off, Elwin, so what do we know about his condition? He shot himself, and what do we know about the condition of the baby here?
Yeah, well, look at how busy that interstate was. So all of this happened during a busy time in Eugene, Oregon, and it happened after a police pursuit. So what we know from police is that he shot himself. They're saying that his condition is unknown, so they're not saying whether he's dead or not at this moment. The good news here is that that one-year-old boy is safe and sound in police custody. But again, we don't really know exactly the details as to how this police pursuit occurred specifically, whether he was seen in surveillance cameras or not, whether someone called, spotted. We know that he initially fled the scene in a Toyota Corolla, a silver Toyota, and then they spot him in Portland in a black sedan. So we don't really know the details as to what happened after he fled the scene, simply that he was spotted in Portland, and then, of course, everything ended, that whole manhunt that literally, stretched from Washington to Oregon. And we know that U.S. Marshals and FBI were involved, finally ended today.
And Ellen, just looking at the details of this case, it's a lot to take in. You got allegations of child rape, of murder, of kidnapping. How did this all start?
Yeah, so to get a full picture as to how this all took place, we have to go back to February. That's when he was accused of child rape. He pled not guilty, but in court documents, it alleges that he sexually assaulted an underage girl at his home while she was sleeping. Now, the one thing to point out here is that at that home, he was living with another underage girl that he met while he was a school resource officer at her middle school, and that he shared a 9-month-old at the time with her. So that is what took place at that moment. And then after that is when police say he was set to appear in court on Monday.
For one of those charges?
Yes, for that charge. And instead, on that day, he went to the school where his ex-wife works. According to police, he shot and killed her there. And then police obtained a search warrant. They went to his home later that day, and that's when they found his girlfriend dead. So they believe he killed not only his ex-wife, but his girlfriend as well, and then took off with that 1-year-old boy.
What else do we know about his background? A former cop, a school resource officer at a middle school. What else can you tell us?
So I called Yakima Police Department and talked to them about his history. So he had been employed for 9 years. And when they told me that he resigned, I asked, why did he resign? Was there something going on? They said, well, he did face disciplinary action right before he resigned. And when I asked specifically what that was in regard to, they did not elaborate, right? So we do know that he's 39 years old, that he did have that disciplinary action. He resigned after that, but he was a school resource officer and worked at the school as recently as last year.
It just seems like red flag after red flag after red flag.
Absolutely.
Elwin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gadi.
And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, there are protests in Tennessee tonight where teachers could start carrying guns in the classroom. And according to the law that just passed, the teachers don't have to tell parents if they're carrying or not. Plus, you have Clear, that airport security screening service. Well, if you do, listen up, because there's a new California bill that wants to ban it for some passengers. NBC's Steve Patterson is going to be here with those details. And later this hour, it is the future of soccer. Drone soccer, that is. We're going to show you why this high-tech sport is part of the gamification of education, and it's also a lot harder than it looks. Stay tuned. Whoa. Okay, hold on. Hey, welcome back. Details on day 2 of Donald Trump's trial are straight ahead, but first, here are some other headlines we're watching tonight. The drunk driver who killed a brother and sister over the weekend in Michigan has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and could face life in prison. The 66-year-old woman crashed into a building where a birthday party was being held on Saturday. The 4-year-old boy celebrating his birthday and his 8-year-old sister were killed, and a third person was left with severe injuries. Lawmakers in Tennessee have passed a bill allowing teachers to carry concealed guns into public classrooms there. Now, that controversial measure sparking outrage with protests breaking out at the State House today. The bill comes a year after a tragic school shooting in Nashville, which killed 6 people. President Biden today hitting the trail in Tampa, Florida, a state his campaign thinks he has a shot at winning. Biden basically blamed Trump for the state's impending 6-week abortion ban, using that law in an upcoming referendum, building a case to help his chances of winning there. Former President Trump took Florida in the last 2 elections. And Megan Thee Stallion is being accused of harassment by her former cameraman. He says he was actually forced to watch Stallion have sex with another woman in a car back in 2022. The suit claims Stallion also fat-shamed him and created a toxic work environment. Stallion's lawyer calling it an employment claim for money, saying they're going to deal with it in court. And wildlife officials in Florida had quite the situation on their hands when they found this gator on an Air Force runway. That massive gator does not look very big right there, but it was just relaxing under the wheels of the plane. You see it next to some people. It looks way bigger, and they were able to remove it, but not without a fight. Alligator was relocated to a new area further away from that base. And it is day 6 of former President Trump's hush money trial that wrapped up today. And let's just say it kind of turned out to be a class on why tabloids do what they do. This guy, the former publisher of National Enquirer, David Pecker, is the first witness for the prosecution. And Pecker called the former president a friend and detailed how he was asked to be the eyes and ears of Trump's 2016 campaign by Michael Cohen and Donald Trump himself, which involved publishing negative stories about his opponents and positive stories about Trump. Pecker also testifying that his publication did publish a completely false story about Senator Ted Cruz at the time, one that Trump brought up on the campaign trail repeatedly. That story was also pretty wild, by the way, saying that Ted Cruz's father had a connection to Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination of JFK. Just a wild day overall, and there was a lot more that went on. So let's bring in NBC's Dasha Burns to break down some of this. Dasha, so much about the inner workings of tabloids today, and then Pecker bringing up something also about a doorman and an illegitimate kid story. What was that all about?
Yeah, kind of a soap opera playing out in court today, Gadi. Wild is a good way to describe it. Yeah, Pecker brought up another example of a catch and kill that the Enquirer did, where a doorman at Trump Tower was shopping around a story that alleged that the former president had an affair with a maid at Trump Tower and fathered an illegitimate child. Pecker said he called Cohen, told him about it. He was always calling Cohen about anything like that that came up. Cohen called Trump, and they decided that they would pay the doorman $30,000 and make sure that that story was not published so as not to damage his presidential campaign. He also brought up, this was toward the end of the day today, and we'll pick up again on Thursday, I'm sure, Karen McDougal, the playmate that alleged an affair with former President Trump as well. She was shopping around that story. We were just getting into that narrative as court was wrapping up today. But the point of all of this and the line of questioning from the prosecution is to show that this was a pattern, that the Stormy Daniels incident didn't come out of the thin air, that there was collusion between Pecker, Trump, and Cohen to suppress any sort of negative story about Trump, highlight like what he did with Ted Cruz, whether true or not, bad stories about his opponents. This was all sort of part of that scheme to influence the 2016 election, Gadi.
And Dasha, we also heard Pecker talking about how Trump micromanaged his business. What does that do to Trump's defense of like, hey, I don't know what's going on. I didn't know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
Yeah, he knew him very well as a businessman, actually. So much of today was spent establishing the relationship between Pecker and Trump, how they've known each other since the late 80s. They've been in regular contact. It was very much a quid pro quo, mutually beneficial relationship. And yeah, I mean, that was exactly what he sort of described. Trump was a micromanager. He really was a frugal businessman, counted every dollar. Every dollar was important to him. And so, you know, if Trump's defense tries to say, hey, he was not involved, he was just signing the checks, that's not the picture of the kind of businessman that David Pecker knew in his decades-long relationship with the former president.
And Dasha, talk to us a little bit about the gag order hearing. I know that every time the former president speaks, there are reporters everywhere going back to that gag order and being like, wait a minute, was he allowed to? Is he not allowed to? And then there was a hearing about all that today. How did that go?
Yeah, when he speaks, when he posts on Truth Social, he has, the prosecutors have alleged that he has violated that gag order about 10 or 11 times. And that exchange did not go so well between especially Trump's lawyer and the judge. Trump's lawyer was asserting that Trump didn't willfully violate the gag order, that he has been attacked by the likes of Cohen and Stormy Daniels, and so he is simply responding. He is a candidate for president, and he needs to be able to defend himself. But the judge kept asking Todd Blanche, Trump's attorney, what examples can you give of when Trump was directly responding to an attack? And Blanche couldn't answer that question. He said, you know, Trump is trying his best to stay within the gag order. And that's when Judge Merchan basically said, look, you're losing all credibility in this courtroom. A pretty explosive statement for a judge to say to a defense lawyer.
And Dasha, looks like no court tomorrow, but we will be checking back with you throughout the week. Dasha, thanks so much. And we are following some breaking news in Pennsylvania primaries where the polls just closed at the top of the hour. Now, this comes as no surprise, but it's official. President Biden is the projected winner of the Democratic presidential nomination there. And that is despite an effort from activist groups opposed to the war in Gaza who urged voters to write in uncommitted on their ballot as a form of protest. On the GOP side, former President Trump is the projected winner. Both Trump and Biden spent time in Pennsylvania over the last couple of weeks campaigning ahead of the primary there. Over in Ukraine, more fighting today as authorities say a Russian drone has attacked the Black Sea port of Odessa. And among the victims, 4 kids, including 2 babies and at least 14 apartments that were damaged in the blast. And that is the backdrop of the Senate debating that $60 billion aid package that would provide critical support to Ukraine. And again, it is tied up in that TikTok legislative package that we told you about at the top of the show. And that would give the country what its President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling a chance at victory. Now, one vote this afternoon passed overwhelmingly, but it is not over the finish line just yet.
The time has come to finish the job, to help our friends abroad once and for all. Let us not delay this. Let us not prolong this. Let us not keep our friends around the world waiting for a moment longer.
And let's bring in NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, I'm watching. I mean, it looks like the floor, they're on a procedural right now. But if this passes and passes very soon, how soon could Ukraine get what it needs, and what kind of aid specifically are we talking here?
Hey, Gadi. Well, first on the state of play, the Senate just started taking the first of 2 votes. The first vote is procedural. It's not very important. It will be voted down. The next one is final passage. This is passage of the entire $95 billion package. And let's show again what's in it. The centerpiece is $60 billion in aid to Ukraine. This is the provision that had held up passage for so long because a lot of Republican senators and before that House members did not want to pass it. There's also $26 billion in aid to Israel, some of which will be humanitarian assistance for Gaza. And there's $8 billion in assistance for Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific security. This bill also includes that provision that requires TikTok to divest from its Chinese owner, the Beijing-based company ByteDance, or face a ban. That ban would be triggered within 9 to 12 months if the company does not sell. The Senate is voting now. The first vote, as I said, procedural. The second vote will be final passage, so we expect it to happen within the next hour or 2. And in terms of specific weapons, this will be up to the Biden administration to try to get out the aid as quickly as it can. But we know from the Pentagon that what Ukraine has asked for is artillery ammunition and air defense missiles in particular. This will certainly go a long way toward getting the Ukrainians what they say they need to keep defending themselves against Russia.
And how much opposition have we seen throughout the day to this?
Well, the vote earlier was 80 to 19, and nowadays in the Senate, the cloture votes, the so-called procedural cloture votes, end up being pretty indicative of the final vote. So of those 19 senators who voted against moving forward, 17 of them were Republicans. Most of them are opposed to the Ukraine aid portion of it, and that's been the crux of the opposition. But some of the other Republicans, some of the Republican supporters felt a bit freer to move forward and support the bill after former President Trump had been waffling on it. He did not make a clear attempt to try to kill the bill. And there was still some attempt by Republicans to try to sink it. Let's show a tweet by Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who had pleaded with his fellow Republicans to band together, noting that if 41 of them had voted against the bill, then it would ultimately have failed. That is the number that you need to filibuster a piece of legislation. Michael Lee didn't come close to that. He got 17 of his Republican members, and 2 Democrats ended up voting with that. The bill will pass. It will head to President Biden's desk, and Ukraine will get the aid that it says it desperately needs. Gadi?
And Sahil, now it's just a matter of timing, and I'm looking at the clock that's running here on the Senate website. It's looking, again, the procedural that we're looking at right now, it's got like 5 minutes left. So after this procedural vote, what comes next, and how soon could we see this possibly pass?
So firstly, I'd say, Gadi, never trust the clock on the screen. Yeah. They always move past it. They always extend that time. It's rare that they actually stick to timing. But, you know, this is a late on an evening, in a week where the Senate wanted to be in recess. That is the kind of thing that tends to motivate senators to act more quickly than they ordinarily would. So there is a possibility that they move this more expeditiously than they ordinarily might. What we're seeing now is a procedural vote called by the Senator Mike Lee, the Republican I just mentioned, who had tried to sink this bill. And he's, you know, trying to throw all sorts of daggers at it to slow it down. This is one of them. He will not succeed because he doesn't have the votes. Once his vote fails, then the Senate will move immediately to the next vote. And the next vote is final passage. It's the motion to concur in the House bill. It's just Senate jargon for the House bill came over there. They're going to vote on passing it. No more procedural, you know, mumbo jumbo. This is it. This is the final vote coming up after this.
So, Sahil, what you're saying is what people are seeing on the other side of the screen from you right now is like the last-ditch effort to stop this. Everyone's standing around, waiting for the clock to run out. This gets voted down, and then the show happens.
That's right, and it's been a fait accompli that the bill will pass. The key vote was earlier today. If Mike Lee wanted to show his strength and show that he had the support to stop it, he had to show it earlier today, and he did not. That was the vote where the vast majority of senators went on the record saying they support this bill. I mean, 80 votes for a major piece of legislation in the Senate. It's almost unheard of. It's pretty extraordinary how we got here, especially because Republicans started by saying they would not pass any foreign aid without border security. Initially, Democrats said no, and then Republicans held firm. Democrats caved and cut that deal for border security with Senator James Lankford. It was championed by Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader. And then it was ultimately killed by Republicans while Donald Trump was pushing them to reject it. And now Republicans are passing the foreign aid bill with none of the border security measures they wanted. So it's been a really dizzying sequence in terms of how we got here. But the end result is overwhelmingly, Democrats wanted this aid. A large faction of Republicans in both the House and the Senate wanted this aid. It looks like they are going to get their wish in about the next hour. Gadi?
In the next hour, any minute now. Sahil Kapoor, thank you so much. And coming up, paying to skip airport security lines. Some California lawmakers are trying to put an end to line jumping from clear customers. We're going to explain that. But first, you got to see this. This is 2 mountain lions that were taking a catwalk along the Vallecito Reservoir in Colorado when they got stuck in that spillway last Friday. Now, the dam operator, fortunately, he was about to release water down that spillway, but he was able to notice those 2 cats that were trapped. He called Colorado Parks and Wildlife to save the kitties, and that's when wildlife manager Ty Smith was able to get those 2 lions out. There he is wearing that cowboy hat. And fortunately, he got them out with that rope, with that bar, and they were released back into the forest perfectly all right. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. An attempted kidnapping in Oregon is caught on doorbell cam. More on that story in just a moment. But first, here's some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. Body cam video out of New Mexico shows a man with an axe showing up to a courthouse and threatening to kill a judge. Now, this happened earlier this month, and apparently the man had been trying to track the judge down before getting arrested, even visiting a law firm and an office where he thought she would be. Luckily, no one was hurt, and he's now facing felony charges for attempted first-degree murder and aggravated assault. And an Arizona judge has declared a mistrial in the case of a rancher accused of fatally shooting a migrant on his property near the U.S.-Mexico border. Jurors failed to give a verdict after days of deliberation, and a hearing next week could see prosecutors refile that case. And a bold confrontation in Long Beach, California. A man used an Apple AirTag to track down the thief who stole his car, then confronted him at a gas pump. That's when the robber ran away, leaving behind his wallet and his driver's license. And it turns out he was his nearby neighbor. That man's dash cam video also shows the robber bragging about the stolen car and talking about stealing his wife's car next. Turning now to the world of travel, there are really only two kinds of travelers, those who get to the airport hours ahead of their flight and those who relate to this scene in the classic Home Alone. Remember this?
Did we miss the flight? No, you just made it.
Okay, but here's the thing. That was way back in the 90s, before those TSA lines and the whole take off your shoes thing. And let's be real, those Richie McAllisters probably would have had Clear. And so realistically, there'd be this whole scene where they all cut right in the middle of that TSA line to the chagrin of everyone else, right? Well, guess what? Here in California, there is a new bill to try to ban Clear from airports and do away with the whole certain pre-screened people who pay extra get to skip all the way to the front of the line thing. And joining us now is NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson. Steve, full disclosure, are you the type of, like, get to the airport early traveler, or are you a Clear guy?
You already know, man. I'm last minute, try to make the flight. Of course, full disclosure, I have Clear. It's so funny.
Same.
Of course you do, right? I mean, okay, look, listen, we also spend like a lot of our lives in airports, right? So it just makes sense that we need something a little extra.
We will be very objective about this.
Very objective. Very objective. Okay, so let's start with what Clear is, right? Clear is this service. You see the little kiosks at certain airports. It's only at like maybe 50 airports across the country, but you can sign up. There's usually a guy with a clipboard. He's trying to get you, hey, sign up for Clear. You pay a big fee every year. I think it's close to $200, $189, something like that. And then you essentially, literally, cut the line. Like some guy takes you to the front of the line, and then you go through security. You go through security just like anybody else, but you still are cutting in front of people in the same line.
Even the people with pre-check.
Even the people with pre-check, yes. So these lawmakers are like, well, that's messed up. Let's do something about it. Let's drop some legislation and try to get this out of here because of two things. One, they do claim that there have been some safety breaches with Clear. Like it's just a little bit easier maybe for people to get around the system. And then two, which is the big one, which is the dignity of passengers, right? People watching, waiting in line and seeing these people just walk right past them because they paid more money to do so. So that's the spirit of this.
If this goes into effect, what happens in California?
Essentially, Clear is gone, right? So okay, let's be clear. No pun intended.
Yeah, I thought you did.
I didn't do that on purpose, I swear. So to be clear, the lawmakers are not necessarily targeting Clear. Like they've explicitly stated, we are not trying to put this service or any third party out of business. We are specifically targeting the physical act of cutting in these general lines. If this passes and Clear gets it approved with the TSA to make their own line, that's totally fine. But they can't keep using the line that everybody else is using because that isn't fair.
Wow, so there would be one line for the no TSA pre-check, the just normal line, pre-check line, and then an additional Clear line to get you all the way through?
And think about it. It would have to be because right now you have to have, if you want to cut in the pre-check Clear, you have to have Clear and pre-check. So there will be it will be regular line, pre-check line, Clear without pre-check, and Clear with pre-check. Right. Think about that.
I don't know. All I have right now is my mother-in-law in my head being like, well, just 3 hours early. Just get to the airport
be on time,
like
Gadi.
a reasonable person. Yeah. Steve Patterson, thanks so much for that.
Thanks, man.
And still to come, a deadly mid-air Navy helicopter crash in Malaysia. What we're learning tonight about that tragedy, plus headlines from around the world are coming up next, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Ralph Sanchez has an incredible story of a baby girl's survival in Gaza. We're going to have that in a moment. But here are some of the other headlines from around the world right now. Just absolutely terrifying video of a helicopter crash in Malaysia. Keep your eyes on the right side of the screen here. The helicopters were rehearsing for an upcoming anniversary celebration today when they crashed mid-air, sending both choppers hurtling to the ground. The 10 people on board were killed. Malaysian Navy says they'll investigate the cause of that crash. And another set of earthquakes rocked Taiwan early this morning, just a few weeks after a 7.4 quake hit the island earlier this month. The strongest of this set was a 6.1. Luckily, no one was hurt, but they did cause further damage to 2 buildings that had been evacuated a few weeks ago. And 5 migrants, one of them a child, died while trying to cross the English Channel from France to the UK, and it happened just hours after the British government approved a bill to deport Rwandan migrants who entered the country illegally. French Navy ships were sent to help with the rescue and found an overcrowded boat with more than 100 people on board. They were able to rescue about 100 people and will be taken to a French port. And tens of thousands of Argentinian students took to the streets earlier today to protest cuts to higher public education there. Those protests are in response to President Javier Milei's spending cuts, specifically the ones affecting the funding of the country's tuition-free universities. Milei won elections last November, pledging to take a chainsaw to public spending. And today, a grim milestone in the Israeli-Hamas war, 200 days since it started. Here's where things stand right now. Over 100 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. Israel thinks about a quarter of those people are likely dead. Gaza's health ministry says over 34,000 people have been killed since the start of the war, and the UN says roughly 85% of the population has been displaced. Now, Israel and Hamas do not seem to be close to a ceasefire deal, which means those hostages don't have a way home yet, and those people in Gaza still face daily airstrikes. And those airstrikes taking the lives of Sabrine al-Sakani and her husband and their 4-year-old daughter. Sabrine was 30 weeks pregnant at the time, and miraculously, doctors were able to save her unborn child. She's also been named Sabrine. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez has this story.
It's a scene now grimly familiar in the aftermath of an Israeli strike. Rafah's Kuwait hospital flooded with the wounded. Until something extraordinary. A baby girl delivered by emergency C-section from the womb of her dying mother. The first moments of her life, a desperate race to the ICU. She's 2 months premature, and she isn't breathing. This doctor trying to coax air into her tiny lungs. It's only after an oxygen mask is fitted that she cries out for the very first time. But she needs care they can't give her here. Our crew follows on a dangerous journey through the darkness to the Emirati hospital, where a neonatal ward is at least partially functioning. Her weight recorded at just over 3 pounds. The little girl was born an orphan. Her mother Sabrine, father Shukri, and 3-year-old sister Malak all killed in the Israeli strike. Now she's in the care of her grandmother and uncle. We were there for their first glimpse of her. Little Adham lifted to see his cousin through the glass. Doctors say the early birth left the baby's lungs in severe distress, but
now she's doing much better.
Some comfort for a family deciding what to name a child who lost everything before her life even began. They chose Sabrina Roa, her mother's name, and the Arabic for soul. You are my soul, you're in my heart, she tells the child. Sabrine's defiant heartbeat, a note of hope in Gaza's chorus of grief. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
Raf Sanchez, thank you. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And for one high school here in California, the future is this thing called drone soccer. It's kind of like Quidditch from Harry Potter, but less magic, more circuitry. We're going to show you when we come back, so stay tuned. Tonight in the future of everything, we are taking soccer to new heights, literally. But first, here are some headlines we're watching. NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft has finally broken its radio silence, or actually radio gibberish, because since November, the probe had been sending unreadable data until engineers found a single memory chip to be responsible for that bug. So they broke up the code, they rewrote it, and now one of the longest operating spacecraft in history is once again relaying some coherent space information from billions of miles away. And to something right here on this planet you might think looks a little out of this world. This home you see on your screen was built by a 3D printer. And at the time, it was the world's largest 3D printer at the University of Maine, and it could make homes using bio-based materials. Now the university is revealing a new machine that is 4 times bigger that could one day create entire neighborhoods. It's named the Factory of the Future 1.0. And these things may literally build doors to more affordable and greener housing in that entire region. Meanwhile, one program in New Mexico is helping high school students get ahead in their career. The nonprofit Future Focused Education not only offers students paid internships, but a chance to change their lives. NBC News Now anchor Kate Snow shows us more.
We'll be in this room right here.
In Albuquerque, New Mexico, these medical assistants,
take a few deep breaths,
interior designers, prosthetics crafters, and automotive mechanics are still in high school. It's all part of a program called X3, run by local not-for-profit Future Focused Education.
Tell me what the X3 program is.
Our paid internship program, we partner with schools and community to create real-world learning out in the community.
Ali Cias, Director of Social Emotional Learning and Well-Being for the program, says taking kids from the school world and into the real world makes all the difference.
When you create learning opportunities that are relevant, that lights the spark.
Like the spark in senior Shifa Hudrat, who spends 12 hours a week at the local hospital.
Why did you think it would be important for you?
Just getting like that clinical experience. It's nothing that you can learn out of a textbook.
What kinds of things have you learned?
I've learned how to triage patients and then also working with providers.
You're how old?
I'm 18.
You're 18.
The fact that I was able to like intern and then also go to school at the same time, I definitely makes me feel proud.
One of Shifa's mentors, Office Supervisor Angelica Zamora Yelo, is also proud.
It just feels very awesome. I don't see the students or the intern, I see them as colleagues, as peers.
Equals.
Yes.
A feeling shared by mentor and mechanic Doug Noblet, who has seen his intern, Sam King, grow immeasurably.
When he first started, he was very nervous and excited. And a lot of our specialty tools was kind of like, whoa, he's now using those tools by himself.
In how many months?
Maybe a month and a half.
Plus, Doug and the X3 program have helped Sam find direction.
I feel more confident, at least knowing what I want to do.
You can see a path.
Yeah.
I see that smile. It must feel really good that you're helping him figure that out.
Yeah, it does feel great.
And the program isn't just about the work.
What have you learned about yourself?
Learn how I process like interactions, whether that be with a patient, another coworker, a provider.
I've learned how to be more independent.
And these students are getting paid. For some, that allows them to stay in school, something Cecia Gonzalez appreciates.
Coming out of high school, my family is in a college fund family, right?
They're not, yeah.
So for me, it was a little challenging, the idea of going to college. How am I going to pay for it?
It sounds like these internships really created a big opportunity for you.
Being able to have a paid internship and not have to work 9 to 5 while being in school makes the biggest difference.
If you hadn't gotten these paid internships, would you have taken a different job to help the family out?
Yes.
Cecia is now a freshman at the University of New Mexico, studying nursing and interning at a pulmonary lab.
You're on a full ride now. Would you have ever seen any of this coming?
Never in a million years. It's like overwhelming to think of like how far I've come and how much effort it's taken.
Does it make you emotional?
Yeah.
What's that emotion?
That pride shines through in the nearly 150 participants and 1,300 graduates of the program who've learned new skills that could later make meaningful change in their own lives and contribute to the New Mexican economy.
What kind of change do you see in your students?
Their ability to dream and believe that they belong in community and that they have a place somewhere where their greatness can shine.
X3, building up the future, one student and mentor at a time.
Wow, inspiring. And while it's amazing to get real-world experience outside the classroom, there are still some pretty cool things going on inside the classroom after the bell rings. You've heard about soccer, obviously, but what about drone soccer? It's almost like Quidditch from Harry Potter, but a much cooler version that combines aerospace tech with soccer skills. It's basically taken soccer to the sky. We got to visit a California school that is putting this up-and-coming sport on the map, and we even got to try it for ourselves, and it is not as easy as it looks.
In the world of high school sports, a new game is taking off. At the Sato Academy of Math and Science in Long Beach, California, it's not football or basketball that's churning out their star athletes, it's drone soccer.
I love my team, and I just love this club so much.
Albert Gallo, Sato's aerospace engineering teacher, piloted the idea to bring drone soccer to Sato, and he now doubles as coach for 3 of the top teams in the country.
Does this seem like a game or kind of a lesson plan, or maybe a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. They've gamified aerospace, where they've taken all the things that I love about aerospace, and they've taken everything about drones, and they've found a way to make it fun for kids.
Here's how it works. 2 teams of 5 drones each compete in 3-minute sets, where the striker tries to score by passing through suspended hoops, while defenders try to block them.
Drone soccer is very similar to Quidditch.
But instead of you guys flying around on the broomsticks, you guys are the drones.
Yes.
You don't kick the ball, you are the ball.
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome. Harry Potter. Look at that.
And each student is also responsible for fixing drones when they go down.
So that's the battle damage you just got, right?
Yeah, one of them fell off.
Okay. Was that
broke off.
from
Contact.
Contact, huh?
And it looks easy, but I promise it is not.
Whoa! Okay, hold on.
So we're going to give you a drone that's a little bit slower.
Slower, huh?
Just for beginning,
Okay,
starting off.
all right.
After a whole lot of turbulence and some tips from the pros, I finally scored on an undefended goal.
We got one! I don't understand how you guys kept all of those up. I mean, it is like magic.
It took us months.
Thank you.
That magic on display every time Sato competes, almost always droning out the competition.
It sounds like this school is somewhat of a powerhouse when it comes to drone soccer. What's the secret?
A lot of practice.
Yeah.
It has been a lot of rigorous practice.
Sato has taken first in every competition they've entered.
Competing with other awesome teams, it kind of helps develop new strategies and get better, and makes the long hours worth it.
And here, there's no boys team or girls team. Drones don't have a gender.
It seems like girls and boys in this program, it seems like everybody's on the same level.
They're pretty much on the same level now. U.S. Drone Soccer promotes that they would like 1 female pilot to be on every team. Our requirement here for our program is 50-50.
If you're wondering whose drone that was, it just kept dominating over there. That was Audrey over here. What was the secret to your success?
What I like to do is kind of mix up different flight paths each time and find different routes to get around to get into the goal without causing too much damage.
We're doing something pretty out of the ordinary and pretty advanced right now with drone soccer, and I think that's definitely kind of like our stepping stone.
This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And that means that you guys are the pioneers.
Yeah.
Young pioneers propelling their way to greatness, one high-flying battle at a time.
Just wait. And those are the kids that are going to be designing the flying cars we're all going to be flying in no time. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.